Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Great Spank Debate. My name is Stu Perry. I go by Mr. Stu, and I'm a child therapist with a little over 15 years of professional mental health experience. And today I'm so excited to be talking with you about discipline, alternative forms of discipline, and this controversial form of discipline known as spanking. Today we'll be talking about what the law is with spanking, as well as what effects spanking has on children. Before we get started, though, I do want to tell you about a few things that are coming up with Mr. Stu TV. First is to know that you should follow Mr. Stu TV on YouTube and YouTube Kids. That's youtube.com/@MrStuTV. You do have to put in the little @ symbol there, but youtube.com/@MrStuTV, and you will find all sorts of great mental health resources for yourself and the kids who trust you in their lives. That's first. And then also in 2 weeks, coming up on May 28th, there is another Facebook Live event where I will be discussing ages and stages, and we'll be understanding childhood development together. But today, we are here for the Great Spank Debate. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about where does this debate even come from? Isn't it that, yes, kids have been spanked and they turn out just fine? Or maybe you are a believer in the other side of this debate of that spanking is one of the worst things that you could do to a child. Or maybe you're somewhere in the middle that, sometimes it's okay and sometimes it's not. Spanking has been the subject of a lot of controversy. It's been a debate even over moral judgment for so many years, and with so many different opinions from so many different well-qualified individuals. If you search online for if spanking is a positive or a negative form of discipline, or a good or a bad form of discipline, you will find all sorts of different people, doctors and therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists and teachers and parents, all who seem to have the same credentials, who disagree greatly on this issue. But there are known lasting effects, both psychological and emotional, that are consequences of this form of discipline. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. You will quickly learn which side of the Great Spank Debate that I am on, but I have to tell you that I was not too long ago on the other side of the Great Spank Debate. As a matter of fact, I was at a training just a few years ago for a program. It's the National Child Abuse Prevention curriculum called Nurturing Parenting, and I was being trained in this curriculum, and our trainer asked, are you someone who believes that spanking is a positive form of discipline at times, not to be used all the time and not as the only form of discipline, but that at times spanking can be a positive form of discipline? And I raised my hand that yes, I believed that spanking was a positive form of discipline, especially at times. And the trainer went on to say this. They said, if you were stealing something from a store, let's say that you were stealing a diamond encrusted bracelet, would that be wrong? And everybody said, yes, of course that would be wrong. Well, then she went on. Okay, let's say you were stealing a video game system. Would that be wrong? People said, yes, of course that would be wrong. Then she went on and she said, if you were stealing a movie, would that be wrong? And people said, yes, of course that would be wrong. And then she went on, if you were stealing a book, would that be wrong? People said, yes, of course. And then she said, if you were stealing a bag of chips, would that be wrong? Would that be stealing? And everybody said, yes, of course that's still stealing. And she said, oh, so it doesn't matter the level, it's still wrong. And she said, child abuse is child abuse. Physical abuse is physical abuse, no matter the level that it happens at. And that really got me thinking and really got me struggling with this question of, is spanking something that children should be exposed to? Let's talk about this, that, as I said, it has been one that has been debated for quite some time, and both sides, the side that believes that spanking is a positive form of discipline and the side that believes that spanking is not a positive form of discipline, both sides believe that they're right. For those opposed to spanking, it often seems like this is a form of abuse, that hitting a child, striking a child, a physical smack of a child, is abuse, while those in favor of spanking think of it as a way to enforce appropriate behavior and give respect to authority. That to spare the rod is to spoil the child, as you may have heard. So let's talk about this first. Is it helpful or harmful? Is it good or is it bad? But before we get into any of that, let's talk about this. Is spanking even legal? Let's talk about a few legal considerations to consider as you are considering this idea of, is spanking an appropriate form of discipline? Is it even legal? Now, here's an important factor to know, is that every state in the United States has a different law about spanking. Some do not strictly prohibit spanking. Some ban all forms of corporal punishment. Some ban all forms of corporal punishment unless it's done by a parent. Some ban the use of items. Others do not. There's all sorts of different things. So let me tell you that in the state of Kentucky, here's the law, and see if this law is sophisticated enough that you would feel comfortable using this law to your defense. In Kentucky, the law is that you may use an open hand through clothing on the butt, and it can't leave a mark. Open hand through clothing on the butt, it can't leave a mark. Now you tell me, is that a law that you want to risk? By that definition, could you see yourself getting in trouble even if you don't think you did anything wrong? Because what if it was open hand on the butt through clothing, but it left a mark? Could you then be in trouble? What if your child said that it wasn't with an open hand and you say that it was? Let me tell you this, the judge is going to listen to the child over you for good reasons. What if you just lose it and you feel like, you know what, it didn't work, my hand isn't strong enough, and so you use a belt? That would be illegal in the state of Kentucky. Every state has a different law, and all those laws are fairly ambiguous to protect children. So the question then comes, even if it's legal, do you want to risk it? Do you want to risk the fact that someone may come knocking at your door and saying that you are accused of child abuse because of this form of discipline that you have chosen to use, even though there are so many other forms of discipline that are proven more effective than spanking? So as far as being legal, spanking technically is legal on a state-by-state, case-by-case basis, And there are specifications as to what legal spanking and illegal spanking is and is not. Do you want to risk yourself, your reputation as a parent, all because you chose to use spanking when there are so many other forms of positive discipline that are proven more effective than spanking is? There's the legal side. Let's talk now about the science behind spanking. As I said earlier, those who believe that spanking is a positive form of discipline say that it instills respect for authority and also is a hard boundary that says this is what's acceptable and this is not what's acceptable. That spanking really places that boundary in children's minds that you are allowed to do these things, you are not allowed to do these other things. But let's talk about what the research actually shows about spanking. There's been a lot of research done on spanking, and the results are still mixed. So let's jump into this understanding that it might be illegal, it might not be illegal, different forms of it might be legal or illegal, and the science is still out on whether or not this is even an effective form of discipline. Are you willing to risk it? All for this thing that you think you need as a parent. There are some studies that also suggest that spanking can lead to long-term negative impacts. Those negative impacts can be things like decreased self-esteem and increased aggression. Those studies show that when you strike a child, what it tells them is that there is a limit to your love, and that can decrease their self-esteem. These studies also show that what you're really saying is don't hit anybody unless you get angry enough. And once you're angry enough, then you can hit them, and that's where that increased aggression can come in. While the science is still out on that definitive blanket answer for whether spanking is effective, do you want your child to be the guinea pig to the experiment? Would you take that risk in any other aspects of your life if it was your child's future that's on the line? If someone said, oh, now this might work, this might help them, or it might cause them to have decreased self-esteem and increased aggression and all sorts of other negative effects, but we won't know until after they take the pill. Would you offer your child up for that experiment? If not, then why are you offering them up for this experiment with spanking? Also, if your child has experienced trauma or does experience trauma, spanking can re-trigger that trauma experience. It can do all sorts of things in the brain that then say that this person who is spanking me is now an abuser. They are not someone who loves me. They are not someone who cares about me. They are an abuser. And that happens especially in children who have a pre-existing experience with trauma. But more than anything, whether it's the belief that it's right or whether it's that it's wrong, I would tell you, it just doesn't work. Spanking doesn't work, at least long term, for what you want spanking to teach a child. Many times, spanking is used as a don't do this thing. Oh, and then you did this thing and you did it repeatedly, whatever it might be, that you did this thing, and because you did this thing, the only option now is to show you that it was wrong, and the way that I'm going to show you that it was wrong is to spank you. But spanking only teaches children what not to do. It doesn't teach them what to do instead. So, for instance, let's say little Elizabeth gets in a fight at school, and you decide, you know what, Elizabeth, you have done the wrong thing. You have fought. I'm going to spank you for fighting. Well, at the end of that punishment, at the end of that discipline, Elizabeth still doesn't know what to do the next time she feels like fighting. All she knows is don't fight. And so when she gets this feeling of I need to fight, I should be fighting, I want to fight, when she gets that feeling, now there's going to be all sorts of stress and anxiety in her because she's going to think, I feel like I need to fight. I feel like this is a time I should be fighting, but I know that if I fight, I'm going to get spanked. So now I don't know what to do. Elizabeth might make a positive choice, or Elizabeth might make a more extreme choice, like throwing a tantrum or harming the teacher, doing all sorts of other things, because Elizabeth has all of this anxiety and stress built up because she knows what not to do, but she doesn't know what to do instead. Spanking only teaches a child what to not do. It also teaches them to not get caught doing something wrong. It doesn't teach them to not do the wrong thing. It just tells them that if you get caught doing this thing, here's going to be the punishment. You're going to get spanked. Rather than, hey, if you get caught doing this wrong thing, yes, there's going to be consequences, but I'm going to help you make a more positive choice in the future. Spanking does not do that. Spanking has nothing to do with the future. It only has to do with right now and the past, and doesn't help children make more positive decisions as they move forward. It only teaches children what to not do and to what not to get caught doing, and it teaches them that if you make a mistake or if you make a poor choice, don't talk about it, don't learn from it, just try to hide it as deep as you can so that you don't get in trouble and get spanked for this thing. Rather than helping children to understand that all people make mistakes, all people make poor choices, and as we make those mistakes, as we make those poor choices, we can learn from them and grow and make more positive choices in the future. Spanking doesn't do that. Spanking is punishment, not discipline. Discipline teaches children how to go, what to do, and punishment just teaches them, this was wrong, don't do it again. Spanking doesn't help them make more positive choices in the future. It only tells them what to not do, what they were wrong for doing, and what to not get caught doing in the future. Well, if that's the case, then let's talk about some alternatives to spanking. There are alternatives. Believe it or not, there are forms of discipline that you can use that are not spanking. One parent I worked with actually believed that discipline and spanking were synonymous with each other. They believed that the only way they could discipline their child was by striking them. You can discipline and discipline well without hitting a child. Let me take you through a few different forms of discipline and a few different alternatives. Let me also say there's going to be a follow-up to this Facebook Live in July that will discuss some other forms of discipline. Today we're talking mainly just about spanking and the pros and cons, legality of it all. But let's go into just some brief overviews about some other forms of discipline that you can use other than spanking. The first is what are called logical consequences. And this just means that it's an if-then statement. So if this, then this will happen. If you do this, then this. Now, consequences, so many times people believe that consequences are only negative, that you can only have negative consequences, but there are positive consequences. If you work hard, then you will get a raise. That's a logical consequence. If you do this thing, you get this reward. That is a logical consequence. Now, there's also logical negative consequences that if you do this thing, then this negative thing will happen. If you choose to play video games rather than do your homework, then you will lose the video game. If you are on your tablet after I've told you to not be on your tablet, then you will lose your tablet. If you choose to not clean your room when I've told you to, then there are consequences for that. Now, when you're using logical consequences, it's important to make sure that the consequence is tied to the behavior. And so many times, parents think that spanking is a logical consequence, that if they did this, I told them that if they did this, that they were going to get spanked, and so if they did it, then they need to get spanked. But it has no tie to the negative behavior. Hitting a child has no connection to them not cleaning up their room. It has no connection to a child mouthing off. On the other hand, it may seem like a good idea to hit when your child has hit, that would be a logical consequence. But if you're trying to teach a child to not hit, then hitting them will not teach them to not hit or that hitting is wrong, but it will teach them that if you decide that you are upset enough, you're allowed to hit. So that's where that logical consequence can come in, and it is important to tie the consequence to the behavior. All the time I hear parents say, well, they didn't clean up their room, so I took their tablet away. And I have to ask them, what does the tablet have anything to do with them not cleaning up their room? And the parent said, well, I felt like I needed to take something from them. That's not always the case, because yes, there are logical consequences. There are these other things called natural consequences. These are an if-then statement that don't need you to do anything for them. If you didn't do your homework, you fail the class and you don't get to play sports. That's a natural consequence. If you didn't clean your room, here's one, then you can't find what to wear or what you want to wear, and I'm not going to help you. That's a natural consequence. It's okay to leave a child with a natural consequence rather than also adding a logical consequence on top of it. If the child's room is messy, again, for instance, and then they can't find a toy that they want to play with, that's the natural consequence. You don't then also need to say, all right, and I'm going to take your tablet because your room wasn't clean. They've already had a negative consequence. You don't need to double consequence them for not cleaning their room. That's just an example, but there's all sorts of other ways to see these things play out. If a child doesn't do their homework, they fail their test, and then they don't get to play sports, you don't need to also add a logical consequence, because there were all those negative consequences that happened because of it. On the other hand, there are positive natural consequences. If you studied for the test, you got a good grade, we're going to celebrate. And that's where you can use logical and natural consequences together. There are all sorts of techniques. There are things like timeouts. There are things like rewards and punishments, where you can use all of those different tools, all of those different techniques, all of those different skills, and you never have to put your hands on a child. Again, there will be another Facebook Live about positive discipline coming in July, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Let's talk about some resources for parents. There are all sorts of things that you can reach out to. You might want to be a little bit careful about what you choose to Google, because like I said, you will find a huge array of all sorts of well-qualified people who tell you all sorts of different things. So maybe just a normal Google search isn't the way to go. I recommend highly a book called The Whole Brain Child by Dr. Dan Siegel and Tina Bryson. They really put together a resource that is easy to read. It is a quick read, and immediately you will have all sorts of tips, tricks, techniques, and skills that you can implement that are all alternatives to spanking. They even go over spanking a little bit in that book and tell you a little bit about why it may be more harmful than helpful, and all sorts of different things that you can do rather than spank when you need to help your child understand consequences to their behaviors. There are also all sorts of other resources, other books, other websites. There is a site called Beacon House. If you go to beaconhouse.org.uk, there's all sorts of resources about positive discipline there as well. And if you are a parent who is just struggling to connect with your child, you're struggling to find alternative forms of discipline, you're struggling to work with your child rather than against your child, if you're struggling with that, then therapy can be a great option for you as well as your child. There is never shame in asking for help when you need it. And it can be a great way to gain an understanding of all sorts of different perspectives and having a safe space for discussion. As we end the Great Spank debate, I hope that you'll take into consideration all of the different things that we talked about, that spanking can really do much more harm than it does good. That there are all sorts of legal concerns that are wrapped up in it, and if you want to risk it, that's on you. But every state has different ambiguous laws about how to spank, when you can spank, all of those different things. And so if you want to risk that, that's up to you. But I just don't think it's worth the risk. Also, with the results still being left to chance as to whether spanking is even an effective form of discipline, do you want your child to be the guinea pig in that experiment? And with so many other proven positive forms of discipline that don't come with the risks that spanking comes with, then I think you can make some alternative choices that will benefit both you and your child and that relationship between the two of you, so that you can work together against problems rather than making it be you versus your child in the problem. If you would like to learn more about mental health, especially children's mental health, then please check out Mr. Stu TV on YouTube. It's youtube.com/@MrStuTV. There you will find all sorts of great resources that you and your children will enjoy. We make tough emotions child's play. So if you have a child who is struggling with difficult emotions, then please check us out on YouTube. Also, there are plenty of these Facebook Live replays where you can find different tips, tricks, techniques, and skills for parents and professionals who work with children. Also, please make sure that you are back again here in 2 weeks on May 28th at 2 p.m. on Facebook Live for the Ages and Stages Facebook Live. And there we'll talk about understanding childhood development from birth all the way up through about age 12. We'll be talking about just the different stages you can expect children to go through and what makes each one such an exhilarating, maybe that's the word, an exhilarating adventure. Before we get there, though, I just want to thank you so much for joining today and for tuning into the Great Spank debate. I know that this is a heated topic with a lot of people on each side, and I hope that today you were at least given something to consider, whether you are someone who is for spanking, or you are someone who is against spanking, or whether you are someone who is teetering there in the middle. I hope that this was informative, and I hope that you feel empowered as a parent to work with your child and build that relationship to where you and your child are working against whatever problems may come their way, and not you versus your child when your child is having a difficult moment. If you can do that, if you can offer that safe, secure environment, then you are setting your child up for success. All children deserve to be seen, heard, understood, known, and loved. And if you are working hard to make sure that your child feels those things, then you are setting them up for a future that is very, very bright. I believe in you, and you are a fantastic parent. You're doing the best that you can. Give yourself some grace and make sure that you forgive yourself after you've made some mistakes. Ask for forgiveness when you need to, and keep on keeping on. Until next time, make sure to spread the word and share the love. Bye-bye.